Our first reading this morning is from John chapter 13, verses 1 to 20. Now before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from the world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in this world, who loved them to the end. Now the devil had already put into the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. So during the supper, Jesus, knowing that his Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around him. Then he poured water into the basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who had said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" And Jesus answered, "You do not know what I am going to do, but later you will understand." Peter then said to him, "You will never wash my feet." But Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "One who has bathed does not need to wash except for the feet, but it is entirely clean, and you are clean, though not all of you." For he knew who was about to betray him. And this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." After he had washed their feet, had put on his robe, and had returned to the table, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me a teacher and Lord, and you have the right for that, is what I am. So if I, your teacher and Lord, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example that you should also do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, servants are not greater than their master, nor are messengers greater than the ones who sent them. If you know these things, then you are blessed, if you do them. I am not speaking of all of you. I know whom I have chosen. But it is to fulfill the scriptures. One who ate my bread has lifted his heel against me. I tell you this now before it occurs, so that when it does occur, you say and you may believe that I am he. Very truly I tell you, whoever receives one whom I send receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me." Here ends the reading.
So for our second reading for today, we are in the beginning of 2 Kings. The first book of Kings talks about the monarchy, and the second half of the first book of Kings talks primarily about the career of Elijah. And so we hear all of the things that Elijah has done, and now it is time for Elijah to pass the baton and pass it to his disciple Elisha. And so listen now to the beginning of Elisha's career and the end of Elijah's. Now when the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven by a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me as far as Bethel." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel. The company of prophets who were in Bethel came out to Elisha and said to him, "Do you know that today the Lord will take your master away from you?" And he said, "Yes, I know. Keep silent." Elijah said to him, "Elisha, stay here, for the Lord has sent me to Jericho." But he said, "As the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So they came to Jericho. The company of prophets who were at Jericho drew near to Elisha and said to him, "Do you know that today the Lord will take your master away from you?" And he answered, "Yes, I know. Be silent." Then Elijah said to him, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me to the Jordan." But he said, "As the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So the two of them went on. 50 men of the company of prophets also went and stood at some distance from them as they both were standing by the Jordan. Then Elijah took his mantle and rolled it up and struck the water. The water was parted to the one side and to the other until the two of them crossed on dry ground. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me what I may do for you before I am taken from you." Elisha said, "Please, let me inherit a double share of your spirit." He responded, "You have asked a hard thing. Yet if you see me as I am being taken from you, it will be granted you. If not, it will not." As they continued walking and talking, a chariot of fire and horses of fire separated the two of them, and Elijah ascended in a whirlwind into heaven. Elisha kept watching and crying out, "Father, Father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." But when he could no longer see him, he grasped his own clothes and tore them in two pieces. He picked up the mantle of Elijah that had fallen from him and went back and stood on the bank of the Jordan. He took the mantle of Elijah that had fallen from him, and he struck the water, saying, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" When he had struck the water was parted to the one side and to the other, and Elisha went over. This is the word of the Lord. So we're still talking this week about vital congregations. Vital congregations is about strengthening what makes a congregation strong, those marks of vitality in a congregation, those things that strong congregations share. How do we focus on them? How do we strengthen them? And how do we adopt them as part of our church's DNA? And this week, we're talking about leadership. The phrase that they've given us is empowered servant leadership. That is, our congregation and the world around us is absolutely dependent on good, faithful leadership. Proactive, committed leaders with strong faith in what enables this congregation to do the things that it is able to do. And that begins with trusting that God will be with you. Leadership ultimately is about knowing that it is not ourselves that we are dependent on, it is about God that we are dependent on. Trusting that God is with us and being thrilled to be a part of the incredible work that God is doing in the world. And the Bible gives us a lot of models of what faithful leadership can look like. There's Deborah and Jeremiah and David and Peter and Paul and Mary and so many others that we can read from and learn from. But today I want to talk about that first step, that step that we take towards becoming a Christian leader. And in order to do that, we're going to talk about Elijah and Elisha. So if you've read 1 Kings, you know all about Elijah. You know Elijah stood up to King Ahab and Jezebel. You know Elijah brought the widow's son back from the dead. You know he had a giant showdown with the prophets of Baal. And you know, honestly, that's not even the fun stuff. At the beginning, the chapter previous to this, the king sends some people off to hear from another god. They go off to hear from the Baals. And Elijah meets them in the road and says, "What are you doing? Is there a god in Israel?" And he sends them back. And they go back to the king, and the king says, What happened? Did Baal say it was going to be good or bad? And they said, "We met this guy." And the king goes, "Was he a hairy guy? Did he say it's going to be bad?" And they're like "What? Yeah, Elijah. Elijah's famous. He is this incredible prophet of Israel. If you've read the book, you know Elijah. Who's Elisha? Who is this? Who is this guy? He doesn't come up at all in 1 Kings. He doesn't show up at all in the narrative until right now. All this whole time, did we know that he had a sidekick? Did he know that there was this other person with him? No, I suppose not. But now it's time for Elijah to get called up into that great beyond. It's time for the sweet chariot to come and carry him home. And Elisha is here. And that matters. Now he and Elijah both know it's going to happen. And Elijah's headed to Bethel, and he says, stay here. You don't need to see this. But Elisha says, no, as the Lord lives and as you live, I will go with you. And they stop in Bethel, and all the prophets come out and they say, hey man, you know he's going to die, right? And Elisha says, yeah, shut up, I'm going with him. And they go down to Jericho, and before he goes down to Jericho, Elijah says, you want to stay here, you don't need to see this. And Elisha says, no, as the Lord lives and as you live, I'm going with you. And when they get down to Jericho, all the prophets of Jericho come out and they say, you know he's going to die, right? And Elisha says, yeah, shut up, I'm going. And then Elijah says, I'm going down to the river Jordan. You stay here. You don't need to see this. And Elijah says, no, I'm going. And this time the prophets, they know Elisha's going to do it. And so they go to watch. And Elijah and Elisha, they go down to the river Jordan. And Elijah takes off his mantle. That's something they wore over their shoulders, right? Kind of like a cloak or something like that. And he rolls it up like this and pop! Right in the river Jordan. And it opens wide. And they walk across on dry land. And then Elijah and Elisha are talking and walking until they can't anymore. They get separated. And this chariot of fire comes down and it picks up Elijah, takes him off into the sky. And Elisha is devastated. He cries out. He rips his garments in half. And he sits there heartbroken. But then he gets up. And he picks up that mantle that fell off in the wind and the whirlwind and the chariot and all that stuff. And he walks back to the river Jordan and he says, is God still here? Or did God go off with Elijah? Is the God of Elijah still the God of Israel? And he takes that mantle and he whips it around in a rat tail and he reaches down the river and he goes, pop! And sure enough, the waters part for him too. We have a lot to learn from Elisha. The mantle is heavy on his shoulders. Elijah is one of the greatest prophets that Israel has ever seen. He's this incredible guy. He's a character. Like, he knows if he gets bad news, it probably came from Elijah. Elijah's got heavy shoes to fill, but he's not afraid. Because he knows that the key to being a leader is trusting that God is going to be with you. Now, we've all got big shoes to fill. I think it was Isaac Newton who said, if I've seen farther than others, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of giants. Well, all of us who live in this world have stood on the shoulders of giants. What goodness that has been accomplished in our country, in our community, in our church, in our family, has done so because people walked the path before us, because of the wisdom and the courage and the strength of the leaders that have gone before. Our congregation is this strong, welcoming community that's focused on mission and justice because of the leadership of so many people who have gone before us. So many people who are here now, people like Agnes Schumann and Miriam Daly, people like Bruce and Carolyn Gillette, like Pastor Pat, like Paul Rutgers. So many in our history have led us to this place, and so many in our present are leading us now. So many faces, if you look around the room, are the faces of leaders. But everywhere there is a great leader, there is a leader who will someday step down. Stop leading or move on for whatever reason. For every Elijah, there's a chariot. And so, for every good thing that we want to continue, there needs to be an Elisha. There needs to be somebody who will pick up the mantle and keep going. And it might be you. Now, we've got a lot to learn from Elisha. The first thing that we can learn from Elisha is that you don't have to be somebody to be the right person for the job. Elisha is not a somebody. We have never heard from him until this point. Maybe he's new. Maybe he was just around, but he never had any influence or did anything special or anything like that, and nobody ever thought it was worth writing down that there was somebody else there. But Elisha is definitely not a somebody. But you don't need to be a somebody. You don't need to be somebody important, somebody special to be the right person for the job. You just need to know that God has a plan for you. About 10, 11 years ago, there was a football coach who was not that great. And he got pushed out. Another, mediocre season. They missed the bowl game again. And so here's this big-time football program. They're starting to look for a new coach. And usually when they look for a new coach, they look for somebody who's a big deal, right? You look for a big name in coaching. You want to find somebody like that. Or, if your program is strong, you might hire from within, take one of the top guys. You hire an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator. Did they do that there? No. They pulled this guy who was their own wide receivers coach. If you follow college football, you know who I'm talking about now. They put this guy who was their own wide receivers coach. He was like 10th out of 11 on the organizational chart, right? He was in a losing program that had just got the head coach fired. He's like the assistant to the assistant deputy of Loserville. And this is the guy that they picked. But 10 years later, we're looking at the best program in Clemson history. That guy was Dabo Swinney. They won 2 national championships in 3 years, and they could probably win it again this year. Who knows what the world might bring? You don't have to be somebody to be the right person for the job. You just have to know that God has a place for you, that there's something for you to do in this world. You've got to trust that God's got something going on. That's the first thing that we can learn from Elisha. Now, the next thing that we can learn is that you can't be afraid of what's going to happen. Now, his critics, they want to scare him off, right? And they keep coming to him and they keep saying, he's going to die, right? You've hitched your wagon to the wrong horse. But Elisha is not afraid. He didn't hitch his wagon to Elijah. He hitched his wagon to God. We can't pretend that the good things that we have will be here forever. But we know that God will be here forever. God is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the one who is and the one who will be. There will always be critics. And Elisha knew exactly what to say to critics. Don't give up because something is ending. It can be tempting to say, I guess that's just it for it. It's gone, and we need to accept that. But every time that Elijah says, stay here, I'm going off, Elisha says, no, I'm going with you. Don't let things fall apart because you don't want to watch them go. Learn as much as you can and be ready. So that when the time comes for you to take on the mantle, when the time comes for you to take on the role that you need to play, to enact the plan that God has for you, you can be ready. The next thing that we can learn from Elisha is you need to know that it's going to take work. Elijah gives Elisha this opportunity to make one last request. What is the one last thing that you want from me before I head on to the great beyond? And Elisha says, please let me inherit a double share of your spirit. Elisha knows that he's going to have to work twice as hard to do what Elijah did. That's just what it takes. In order to take the mantle, in order to move the ball forward, you've got to work with everything you got. Please let me inherit a double share of whatever it makes Elijah into Elijah. Because I know I'm going to need to work twice as hard. Doing things in this world is not easy. And it's not getting easier either. And so what Elisha does is he trusts God. But he knows that trusting God doesn't mean sitting back and waiting on God to take care of things for you. It means going out and working as hard as you can for as long as you can to accomplish the things that God has planned. There's a famous quote from Dr. King. He said, "The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice." And I think that's a quote that resonates with us very much. But what should resonate so much more deeply with us is it bends towards justice because people bent it. You've got to put all of your strength and energy and heart into making the world into a better place if you want to make it into a better place. If you're going to take up that mantle, you've got to work hard. We live in a time when the world is changing. I guess that's always true. If you read the history of our church, The world was changing again. The church was changing again. And here were the leaders who rose up to face it. Here were the leaders that changed the way they were doing things. Here are the leaders that tried something new. So yeah, I guess the world is always changing. But here is a time in which we need people to take up the mantle. There are things that are going on in the world that need the leadership of people of faith. We need a movement to demand that our politicians care about the poor and not just the middle class and the upper class. We need to take drastic action to protect our planet so that it can continue to be this incredible gift of God to generation after generation after generation. And we need people to take leadership roles in our congregation so that the things that we have done for so many years are things that we will be able to continue to do for so many years. So that my children and that my grandchildren and that my great-grandchildren will have a place that, the kind of place that I grew up in which I was loved and blessed for who I was, in which I was taught how to care for the world around me, how to love my neighbor as myself, how to follow and have a foundation in Jesus Christ. Is it your time to take up that mantle? Is it your time to pick up the torch and carry it for those people who have carried it thus far? We had an incredible movement in the United States in the 60s, the Civil Rights Movement. They demanded equal justice under the law and voting rights, but the forces of reaction are pushing to deny that. And some of those successes, chain gangs are back. Prison slavery is back. Internment camps are back, if they ever left in the first place. Wealth inequality is higher now than it has ever been since the Gilded Age. The poor are poorer, and it is harder to be poor in America than it has been in a long time. It's hard to get access to a doctor. It's hard to get enough rest to get back up in the morning. It's hard to get your children an education. You've got to fight with everything you've got to do that. Is it time for you to take up that mantle? Local communities like ours, local communities like Pitman and Glassboro need people who can commit themselves to taking on leadership roles. And I am deeply proud of the people in this congregation who have tried to take leadership and who have taken leadership here in Pitman and in their local communities and have chosen to spend their time, effort, and energy to serve this place and to make sure that it continues to be a wonderful place for us to raise up children and live as families together. But of course, those things continue, and those things need people to take up that mantle. Is it your turn to take up the mantle? And of course, this congregation has been built on the shoulders of giants. It has been an outspoken voice for justice when the nation needed moral clarity. It has been a committed presence alongside the poor who needed to know that their neighbors cared for them and who needed to have something to get them through the day. We've done great things as a congregation, but we can't rest in that because we have so many great things to do. And we need people who believe that God will be able to take up that mantle. Maybe it's not in your church or your community. Maybe it's at work. Maybe there's somebody who kept your work life going, who built a culture of a place where everybody felt valued, and that person is moving on. And maybe you need to take up the mantle in your work and be the person that your work needs you to be. Or maybe it's your family. Maybe there's somebody who kept things together, and you need to step into that role. But I want you to think. I want you to listen for where God is calling you, right? I love it when we have a cell phone go off in worship because it reminds us that God calls us anytime. In unexpected times, in unexpected ways, maybe not in the way that we were thinking, but you've got to be ready to listen and answer the call of God. You've got to be ready to take up the mantle. You've got to know that you don't have to be somebody to be the right person. You've got to go into it with no fear, knowing that God is going to be with you. And you have to commit twice as hard as you think you need to commit. There's a rabbi, Rabbi Tarfon. He said, you're not required to complete the work, but you can't give up. In some aspect of your life, maybe now or maybe soon or maybe someday, there will be a time when somebody lays down the mantle and you will be called to pick it up. Know that in that moment, just like Elisha, God will be with you. Everything he does because he is confident in God. He trusts that God will see it through. He's a nobody, but he knows that God will make him into a somebody if that's what it takes. He believes he can be the right person for the job. He's afraid of what he might lose, but he trusts God enough to hang on. He can pick up this mantle, and so can you. All you need to do is trust in God. Of course, the ultimate example for us of leadership is the leadership of Jesus Christ. And Psalm 51 tells us that what was special about Jesus, what was perfect about Jesus, what was amazing about Jesus, what was redeeming about Jesus, was his humble obedience. His superpower was being willing to obey, being willing to hear when God calls. Total trust in God. Trusting in God, he taught us how to serve by washing our feet. Trusting in God, he proclaimed that good things were coming, even when it really did not look like good things could ever come. Trusting in God, he walked that lonesome path to the cross and redeemed the whole world. You might not be sure you're the right person. You might not want to be the right person. You might not know what to do. You might be afraid that you will fail. But God will be faithful to you. I was a kid when the 96 Olympics happened. Does anybody remember anything about the 96 Olympics? Well, good. Not too many. I hope this story is true. So my recollection of this, they have the opening ceremonies, right? And they take the Olympic torch from wherever it was before, and they do a lap all the way around the world, and they pass that torch, and they work really hard to make sure that nobody ever drops the torch. The whole symbolism of it is that the flame gets passed on from person to person to person to person, right? And they get it down into, I don't remember what that stadium was. I bet it was named after Coca-Cola Stadium in Atlanta. And they bring the torch over, and they pass it to this archer person, right? He's got a bow and an arrow, and the archer peels back and launches, and whoosh, the arrow is supposed to light up this giant torch. Huge thing up there, big target. And do you know what happens? Oh yeah, you missed. Way up higher and way off to the right. But do you know what happened when he missed? It lit up anyways. They're not jokers over the Olympics. They knew that this could happen, right? This is what God does for us. This is what grace is and what grace means. God will make sure that what you have to offer will be enough. All you need to do is pick up that torch. Now, I'm going to tell you this story. It's definitely not in the Bible. It's almost certainly not true. But as I think about Elisha, and as I wonder what it was like for him to pick up that mantle, I wonder if maybe the first time he put that mantle down into the water, he missed. But here's the thing. God is faithful. Pick up that mantle. Take it on. You don't need to be somebody to be the right person for the job. It's going to be harder, twice as hard as you think it is, but God will be with you, and you cannot be afraid because God is faithful. And through God's grace, you will be able to do things you did not think possible. The light will come into the world whether you miss or not, because we don't hitch our wagons to the leaders that we leave behind. We hitch our wagons to the God who is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, and who promised to be with us always. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.